So I guess I've always sort of carried that energy with me of, yes, let's make this fun. Let's bring the energy up. And I've always wanted to celebrate those things that make life joyful. Hi, I'm Danila Di Croce, and this is Find Your Dolce, the new podcast where we explore joyful living and how to create your Dolce Vita life. I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for joining. Let's get started. In this first episode, we're going to explore what Viva la Dolce means, the concept of the Dolce Vita and where it comes from, and a little bit about me and celebrating 10 years of Viva la Dolce. I can't believe it's been 10 years of Viva la Dolce. It seems like just yesterday I had this idea to start a blog. But I mean, how did this all come to be and where exactly did it get started? I think I have to take a step way back and start from the beginning. So ever since a young age, I've always loved singing and dancing. According to my parents, I've pretty much been singing and dancing since I could walk and talk. Apparently, every time people came over, I would do like a full out show and entertain everyone. So I guess I've always been like naturally inclined to bring the Dolce to the party, right? To bring the Dolce to the room and sort of have fun in the process. And, I remember too, as a little girl, like anytime I was given a task by my parents, I would always be finding a way to add a song, add a dance or a joke or whatnot. And my dad would laugh and shake his head and be like, Danila, la Dolce Vita. He would always say that to me. I definitely got the work done, just in a more fun way. Can you blame me? So I guess I've always sort of carried that energy with me. And it's probably because I've always been like, yeah, why not? Why aren't we celebrating these little moments that make life so sweet, that make life so beautiful? And so that's essentially where the term Viva la Dolce came from. So it was my concept of Viva, like long live, Viva, La Dolce. La Dolce being all the beautiful things that make life happy, that make it joyful, that make it sweet. So to explain where the blog Viva la Dolce started, I'm going to take you back a little bit to how I grew up. So essentially, growing up, I had a lot of artistic influence. Like I said, I always sang and danced. I was always surrounded by beautiful art and music. My parents always loved watching a lot of that on television. And of course, it was all Italian influence with them being from Italy. So I really grew up with the Italian language influence, the Italian music influence. I loved writing. I loved anything to do with words. I heard so many proverbs growing up. So that was another big thing in our household. Anytime there was like a situation, it was always like, well, my nonna used to say, or my great aunt used to say. So I grew up with a lot of poetry, music, art kind of thing. And I think I really loved it because I love creativity. So my love for creativity and the arts led me to study communications in universities. I studied radio and television, and it was an amazing time. It led me to a wonderful career in radio and television in the Toronto community. And I also got to write for different publications. And I did all of this in the Italian community mainly. So a huge part, aside from my love for media studies, is my love for language. So I studied both French and Italian in university as well. And although I loved my work in media, I had always thought about teaching language. I was doing it part-time while I was working, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to get my teaching degree. I want to see where this can go. So I got my teaching degree for language studies, and that took me on another beautiful journey. So for quite some time, I taught Italian and French in high school, and it was an amazing experience. I loved working with the youth and showing them the magic of learning another language and how it can just open so many doors. So I always, though, kind of lived in both worlds. While I was doing my teaching studies, I always incorporated music and entertainment as well. I would do something really fun with my students, which was called Fun Friday. And I would always incorporate different music and cultural elements because, first of all, it was important to me. Secondly, I think it's a great way to learn language. And I just sort of always lived in these two worlds. So it was not long until I decided to do a master's of media production. So once again, even there, I still incorporated the two worlds. So when doing my master's, I thought about an idea that can mesh those two worlds together. And I decided to create a tech lingo translator. So essentially, I took all the social media language that we were using at the time. And I thought, you know what? There's different ways to say these in different languages. So I created this translator. I wanted to mention that even with that, I'm a big advocate of obviously finding your Dolce, creating your Dolce Vita life. That wasn't a program that was like on the list, let's say. I remember looking at the program, and while it was fantastic, I didn't have anywhere that I can fit that in. So I actually asked to do a self-directed study, and I was graciously given the opportunity. And then I was able to create this translator and do sort of my own thing. So I think it's always important to find a way to make things work so that way you're getting the most out of your experience and basically creating a dolce experience for yourself. It's like how they say in Italian, volere e potere, right? When there's a will, there's a way. So while I was doing that degree, I actually had the opportunity to work on a production. I got to work on a documentary about blogging because blogging was really big at the time and it was just sort of coming out. And I worked on this documentary and I thought, okay, this is really cool. I think I want to do my own blog. And there you go. So a few years later, Viva la Dolce was born. And I remember when I was trying to think of like, what do I want to make my blog about? I started to realize like, what's the one thing that I love to do? I love to like inspire others and bring joy, as we talked about before, bring the life to the party kind of thing. Like, let's celebrate all these beautiful things in life. And I wanted to help people understand that La Dolce Vita can be lived every day. You often hear people say, oh, like those people on that yacht are so lucky, or, oh, look at them, they're going on vacation, or they can afford all these fancy things. But to me, La Dolce Vita can definitely be those things, but there's so much more to it. Like La Dolce Vita is every day. I think it's pretty much a mindset. So I really wanted to create a blog where I can share this perspective, this inspiration, and I started Viva la Dolce. Another thing that was really important to me to incorporate into the blog is where I got this sort of perspective. So it was important to me to share my cultural heritage. So I think a lot of what I live and what I speak about and how I see things is really based on my upbringing in Italian culture. It was interesting growing up. I had my family in Italy. So my parents immigrated here from Abruzzo, but all of our family was back home. And so we lived sort of this duality of like every other year we would go back to Italy and visit everyone. And I would live with my grandparents for those summers. And I think it was a huge gift to have that opportunity to go back and forth and live in these two worlds, because it really taught me how there's so much more to the life that I had here in North America. There was such a difference. When you're in North America, it's about like the hustle and bustle and the bigger and better and like American dream. And then I would go to Italy and I would live with my grandparents. And it's like you're in this small town and there's this whole different rhythm of life, much slower, much simpler. My grandfather was a farmer and I would see him take care of the animals. I would help him sometimes. And so like just two totally different worlds. And I think that while my parents, did a really good job of keeping us connected to Italy and the culture while we were living here in Canada, and they still do to this day, I think that going back and living it with my grandparents, hearing their words, hearing the language, hearing the wisdom, the old sayings, all those things, it really, really inspired me to sort of have this different version and vision of life. So fast forward 10 years and now Viva la Dolce is celebrating its 10th anniversary. A lot has changed in 10 years. I mean, when I first started, I only had my son. He was just born. Now, 3 kids later, a lot has changed for me personally. And then just within Viva la Dolce, it's been an incredible time. Throughout the 10 years, I've been able to do so many amazing different things, from, connecting with an incredible community. That's been a little different too, because when I first started, there weren't too many that were covering Italian culture. I actually remember being a little worried, like, is anybody going to be interested? And now, 10 years later, Italian content has exploded. And it's been really cool to meet like-minded individuals and to just meet more and more people who are interested in the culture and, this whole Dolce Vita mindset. So that's been really nice. I've been able to do events both live and online during the COVID time. I remember we did the Dolce Vita Mercato, which was a really cool experience. And that also brought the community together in a really beautiful way. So I was really happy about that. I've been able to do TV appearances and share and inspire Dolce Vita living with so many. I've been able to create products, do online classes with language. So there's been a lot of really cool opportunities. And of course, now the Find Your Dolce podcast, it's such an amazing opportunity to add this other layer to the Viva la Dolce journey. So thank you so much for following along and for being here. Another really important thing that I've continued to include in the Viva la Dolce journey throughout these years is merenda. So if you follow me, I'm sure that you've noticed I have merenda pretty much every day. And, it's part of my dolce. I love to take that pause. I think it's so important. And, it's funny because it actually goes back to something my mom did with her friend. So I remember every day after they would come home from work, either she would go to her house or her friend would come to our house, and it didn't matter what was happening. Like when that doorbell rang, that's it. She was no longer accessible. So no, sorry, your questions have to wait. Whatever I needed had to wait. And it was this beautiful time that her and her friends shared. They had a coffee, they did their chat. And I remember, that time had to be respected, but I was always invited. So I could always join in, and I would have a little bit of coffee with my latte and a little treat, but you didn't disturb them. You either joined or you let them be because that was their time. And it's funny because now I didn't even realize I sort of continued that with my own children. So, they know like mommy's having her time. So you either join her for the merenda or you leave her and let her have those few minutes, which are necessary, right? These pauses with like the busyness of life, I think are so important to just like sit and be and enjoy the moment. But it's been really nice to see like my kids have sort of embraced it and made it their own. And it's been amazing too, because a lot of people actually say, oh my gosh, you've inspired me to have my merenda every day or whatnot. So that's been a really cool part of the journey as well, to see how you have all made it your own too. So another important topic that I want to talk about is La Dolce Vita. What does it mean? Where did this concept come from? So I think it's important to note that a lot of people refer to La Dolce Vita as something that means the good life, the sweet life, which it does. So that concept is correct. But I think it's very important to note that it's interesting how it actually came out of sort of a negative time of our history. La Dolce Vita came out post-war. So essentially, after the war, people really had this desire to get back to life's pleasures and to get back to like a simple, happy time of life. So I think it's really interesting how, it was the negative that sort of pushed this positive. And then, of course, it was made famous by Federico Fellini's film La Dolce Vita, where they sort of looked at it from the lens of like the lifestyle of the rich and famous. And I think that that was also another way that the definition sort of changed because, then people associated it with like luxury style living, etc. But I think it's important to remember the roots, how it came from this post-war period of people just wanting to look at life's pleasures, indulge in them a bit more, and just bring back the joy in life. I think that while it definitely has its place of being this, beautiful, luxurious lifestyle, I think that it's important to note that La Dolce Vita is just finding joy in your everyday. And like I said before, it really is a mindset. Well, that wraps up the first episode of Find Your Dolce. Thank you so much for joining, and I can't wait to share more with you the rest of the season. A presto, which means see you soon in Italian. And remember, find your dolce in your everyday.